Everyone says Aries is confident. They're not. Aries is insecure. And everything you think is courage is actually overcompensation. I've analyzed Aries placements for 13 years. What I discovered isn't bravery, it's terror. The Aries you think is fearless isn't charging forward. They're running from their own inadequacy. Stay until the end. The reason Aries fights so hard will break your heart. Let's start with what everyone gets wrong. When you meet an Aries, they seem so bold. They take charge. They speak first. They act fast. They seem like natural leaders who aren't afraid of anything. And people admire this. They call it confidence. They call it courage. But watch what actually happens. The Aries doesn't lead because they're secure. They lead because not being in control terrifies them. Every aggressive move is a defensive one. Every bold statement is checking if anyone will challenge them. Every fight they pick is testing whether they're strong enough. Because here's what nobody tells you. Aries isn't confident. Aries is constantly proving they're not weak. And there's a massive difference. Here's the pattern. Something challenges the Aries' sense of strength. Could be criticism. Could be someone else succeeding. Could be a moment where they feel uncertain. Doesn't matter what triggers it. The response is always the same. Aggression. They attack first. They get loud. They dominate the conversation. They make everything a competition. And everyone thinks this is just their personality. But it's not. It's defense. Because if they're attacking, nobody's looking at their weakness. If they're the loudest, nobody notices they're shaking inside. The aggression isn't strength. It's a shield. Let me tell you about the 3 layers of Aries insecurity. First layer. The dominance display. This is what everyone sees. The Aries is aggressive, competitive, always needs to win. They interrupt people. They dismiss other opinions. They make everything about being first, being best, being strongest. And people think this is ego. But it's not ego. It's terror that if they're not on top, they're on the bottom. That if they're not dominating, they're being dominated. The dominance display isn't confidence. It's constant audition for the role of strong person. Because the second they stop performing strength, they're convinced everyone will see through them. Second layer. The Impulsivity Shield. Everyone thinks Aries is impulsive because they're spontaneous and brave. Wrong. Aries is impulsive because thinking is dangerous. When you think, you doubt. When you doubt, you hesitate. When you hesitate, you look weak. So the Aries acts before thinking. Not because they're confident in their decisions, but because making any decision fast looks more confident than making the right decision slowly. Every reckless move is avoiding the vulnerability of uncertainty. Every snap judgment is escaping the discomfort of not knowing. The impulsivity isn't bravery. It's running from the fear of appearing hesitant. Third layer. The validation addiction. This is the layer almost nobody sees. The Aries needs constant proof that they're strong. They pick fights to win them. They take risks to conquer them. They challenge people to dominate them. But here's what's actually happening. Every fight won is temporary relief from the question, am I actually strong or am I faking it? The validation lasts about 5 minutes. Then the insecurity returns. So they need another fight, another win, another moment of feeling powerful. It's an addiction. And like all addictions, the dose keeps increasing. The Aries needs bigger challenges, bigger risks, bigger displays of dominance. Because the core insecurity never gets addressed. They're not building confidence. They're collecting evidence against their deepest fear. And the evidence never lasts. Let me tell you a real story. I knew an Aries named Marcus. Marcus was everyone's idea of confidence. Loud, aggressive, always in charge. He ran his own business. He was the guy who walked into rooms and took over. People either loved him or were intimidated by him. But I got close enough to see what happened when he was alone. Marcus checked his phone obsessively for validation. Every email, every text, every social media notification. He needed constant confirmation that people respected him. One day, a colleague disagreed with him in a meeting. Not even aggressively. Just a calm, different opinion. Marcus exploded. He yelled. He made it personal. He turned it into a fight about competence. The colleague backed down. Marcus won. But that night, Marcus called me panicking. He said, what if they're right? What if I'm not as smart as I think? What if everyone's just afraid to tell me I'm mediocre? The fight wasn't about the disagreement. The fight was Marcus needing to prove he was still dominant. Because the second someone challenged him, his entire sense of self started crumbling. That's when I understood. Aries' confidence isn't real confidence. It's performed dominance. Real confidence doesn't need to be proven constantly. Real confidence can exist in silence. Real confidence can lose and still feel secure. But Aries never developed that. Because from a very young age, Aries learned that being strong meant being safe. Maybe they had to fight for attention in their family. Maybe they grew up in an environment where weakness got you hurt. Maybe they watched someone they loved get crushed and vowed never to be vulnerable like that. Whatever the origin, the message was clear. Strength equals survival. Weakness equals annihilation. So they became warriors. Not because they're brave, but because they're terrified of being victims. Here's the psychology behind it. Aries is a fire sign ruled by Mars, the planet of war and aggression. Mars doesn't negotiate. Mars doesn't compromise. Mars attacks. And Aries internalized this as their identity. They're supposed to be the fighter, the leader, the one who charges in fearlessly. But here's the problem. Nobody's fearless. Fear is human. But Aries was never allowed to be afraid. So they buried the fear under aggression. They weaponized vulnerability before anyone could use it against them. They became the attacker so they'd never be the attacked. And over time, the performance became their personality. They can't separate who they are from who they're pretending to be. Because admitting the performance would mean confronting the fear underneath. And that feels like death. The tragedy of Aries is this. They're so busy proving they're strong that they never actually become strong. Real strength is internal. It's knowing your worth even when you lose. It's being secure enough to be wrong. It's having nothing to prove. But Aries built their entire identity on external validation. On winning. On dominating. On never showing weakness. So they're trapped in an exhausting cycle of constantly demonstrating something they don't actually feel. And the worst part? Everyone believes the performance. So the Aries can never admit they're struggling. Because if the strong one is weak, who are they? They've boxed themselves into a corner where vulnerability isn't just uncomfortable. It's identity suicide. And here's the cruelest part. People enable this. They reward Aries' aggression with submission. They reinforce the dominance display by backing down. They validate the performance by being intimidated. So the Aries never gets the feedback they actually need. Which is, you don't have to fight to be valuable. You don't have to win to be worthy. You don't have to dominate to be respected. But nobody tells them this. Because everyone's too busy either admiring their boldness or avoiding their rage. So the Aries keeps performing. Keeps fighting. Keeps running from the fear that if they stop being the warrior, they're nothing. So what can an Aries do? First, admit the truth. You're not confident. You're performing confidence. And performing is exhausting. Second, practice losing small. Pick something low stakes and deliberately don't fight for dominance. See if you survive not winning. Your nervous system needs to learn that you're safe even when you're not on top. Third, find your worth outside of strength. What do you value about yourself that has nothing to do with winning, fighting, or dominating? Build identity there. Fourth, therapy focused on vulnerability and worthiness. Because Aries' pattern usually comes from childhood experiences where being strong was the only way to be safe. And if you love an Aries, here's what you need to know. Their aggression is fear. Their dominance is defense. Their need to win is checking if they're worthy. You have a choice. You can keep backing down and reinforcing the pattern. Or you can lovingly hold your ground and say, you don't have to fight me. You don't have to prove anything. I see your strength and I'm not threatened by it. I also see your fear and I'm not repelled by it. The Aries who truly loves you will be terrified of that level of being seen. But they'll try. Because real love requires real vulnerability, not performed strength. Aries isn't confident. Aries is terrified of being weak. And once you see that fear, the aggression makes perfect sense. It's not strength. It's armor. Are you an Aries? When did you first learn that being strong was the only way to be safe? Or do you love an Aries and finally understand why they can never back down? Comment below. Next video we're talking about Taurus. And the title is, Taurus doesn't value stability, they fear change. The resistance explained. You won't want to miss it. Click right there.